going slightly mad. I'm going slightly mad.
Hello. Hello. Today we're going to finish our second video on third person narrative. So we've done first person and established that they are more tricky than they look. And now we're going to have a look at third person narrative. Third person narratives is actually my preferred narrative. Third person narrative is more versatile in some ways than first person narrative because it gives you more options. In what way? Well, we're going to talk about two different ways that you can use third person narrative. And the first is by having close third person. Close third person is generally what people think that they are writing when they write a first person narrative. Now, people will choose to write a first person narrative because they want to limit the reader's view of what they can see. And they think that the only way to do this is by following only one character and limiting what we know to what they know. As we discussed last time, first-person narrative is very difficult to do this because often it is told in retrospect and that first-person narrator is justifying their own cruddy actions often. So they're telling a story for a reason, often self-justification. But close third person allows the writer to follow a character and limit what the reader can understand. Very useful if you're writing a crime fiction and you don't want to give away who the killer is because you follow closely the detective and you can only pick up the clues as they pick them up. So you can withhold who is the killer from the reader and the protagonist. Yes, you can see how that could be useful. It's also possible to telescope. You can move, yes, you can move through closeness and then pull back, like focusing a camera. So you can use that third person narrator in a way that you cannot use a first person narrator. A first person narrator finds it very hard to gain perspective on what is happening. They can telescope through time, but it's very hard to do that without giving away the fact that they know the ending. Okay, can do it in a short story, but in a novel, sometimes you don't want to give that away. You don't want to give away the fact that the Great Gatsby gets killed at the end of the book. Don't worry, it's a classic book. I'm not spoiling anything. Okay, so you don't want to you don't want that to be blown at the beginning. No, so you can't allude to that. You can't even allude to that if you don't want to completely ruin the of that. No. But with close third person, if it's not a mystery, if it's not doing that, you can move in and give the reader one perspective on a character and then pull out and realize, the character is different to how you thought they were. You can also use it to focus on a small number of people and focus on them mostly. So if you look at something like Pride and Prejudice, mostly what we see are scenes that contain Lizzie Bennet. Not all of them. No, there is the scene where Charlotte Lucas goes and accidentally finds herself in the laneway so that Mr. Collins can propose to her, even though he's irksome. But we don't see a great many scenes that do not contain our heroine. Also, Jane Austen has no scenes in which two men converse together alone, because she had no idea what they would say. No, she didn't. There isn't in the whole of all her works. There is not a single scene with two men conversing alone. It's alluded to, but it's not in there. I know, it's fascinating, isn't it? You don't even realize she's done it. You don't even realize she's done it because she uses close third person frequently to focus our attention on the things she wants us to see and not on the things she doesn't want us to see. Yes, it is very clever. So close third person is generally what people are using a lot. They are focusing on a narrow character, either a single character or a narrow number of characters. They're not head hopping. Now that's really important. Often with close third person, you only get the internal thoughts of your main character. You cannot get the internal thoughts of every character. But I want to give the internal thoughts of every character. Then you can't use close third person. Then what can I use? What can you use? Well, what you can use is an omniscient third person narrator. What's omniscient? Omniscient is an all-knowing. They're like God. I thought you said God was bad. No, God in the machine is bad. God in the machine is bad. But to have an omniscient narrator, one who knows everything, can be very, very useful, especially if you're telling a very large story. So a lot of fantasy novels can use this, science fiction novels, things that range across huge, vast tracts of time. Historical novels can use this. War and Peace is a great example of an omniscient narrator. Tolstoy chose that narrator so he can move across many, many stories across the entire landscape of Russia. And then in the end of the book, you work out why he's done that, because he's able to tell the invasion by Napoleon from all of these different perspectives. It's really fascinating. Yes, it did take us 3 goes to read that book. It did. But by the time we got to the second half, we read that really, really fast because it was like so engrossing. The first part, 3 goes. Had to run at that 3 times. Yes. Yes, you are right. Ulysses would also be very much a omniscient narrator. Even though we mostly follow Harold Bloom, it isn't completely, and we do get multiple perspectives from multiple people, and we get a lot of changes in style in that book. Yes. No, it wouldn't be a good idea to repeat exactly what James Joyce does in Ulysses, because it's pretty huge. It's a bit like Tristram Shandy. You remember her ladyship talked about Tristram Shandy? It's a book that you wouldn't necessarily replicate, but you can steal from copiously, because there's so much going on in there that you will never run out of stuff to nick out of it. Yes. Tristram Shandy is a very good example of first-person narrative. Indeed it is. But he is a first-person narrator who gains a certain degree of third-person perspective, which is why it's such a bonkers book, because he describes his birth and what his parents are doing, especially his father and Uncle Toby. So he is a first-person narrator who actually works more like a third-person narrator. Yes. Is a bonkers book. It's the most bonkers book. Have a look at her ladyship. She really enjoyed that one. So a third-person narrator allows you to write an epic, yes. It allows you to write an epic much more effectively than a first-person narrative does, and much more effectively than close third-person does, unless what you are doing is slowly and quietly evolving your world through the perspective of that person who goes from a very narrow understanding of the world to a much wider understanding of the world. You mean like Grant Everett's Scum of the Universe? Yes, like Grant Everett's Scum of the Universe trilogy, where we follow the world of, instead of deciding to do a massive amount of world building in one hit and try to explain all that to us. No, we follow Bob Tuesday from his beginnings in the deserts of Nevada, all the way through the entire universe of that makes up his world. Yes, and we only learn things as we go along. So it is close third person, but it's a close third person telling an epic story because we are following the one character through the entire thing. So close third person is not limited. It just means that you don't show everything all at once. So it can be especially useful if you are telling something that could overwhelm your reader entirely overwhelm your reader. But it doesn't. No, it doesn't, because we are seeing it with the character afresh, anew, and we are having things explained to us as we need them. As we need it explained. I don't need to know about the hyperdrive until we actually get on a ship with hyperdrive. Yes, and then we ought to know about the hyperdrive. Exactly. So, third-person narrative is incredibly versatile. You can telescope, you can use time, you can make your narrator less reliable by limiting what we can see, or make them much more reliable by expanding out what we can see so that we can see godlike, like the narrator, the things that the characters in the book can't see, and we can see where they're going before they can. Like in Elizabeth Harrower's The Watchtower, we as the reader are understanding where this is going with these two girls when Laura marries Felix, much more in advance of the characters. We can see where this is going, and as you read the second part of the novel, you see where it's gone. You are very well aware that your smug understanding that we know where this is headed. Yes, we do, but now we're stuck in it and we can't get out because we're as trapped as the two young ladies. Yes, so it and it's a real surprise when you read that book that you are suddenly trapped in this abusive marriage that you did not expect, that you foresaw, but that you expected to be at arm's length, and then she pulls you right into it. So third person is incredibly versatile. Where can I buy this Scum of the Universe book? Well, you can get the Scum of the Universe, the whole trilogy, on the Black Cockie Press website. 3 books for the price of 2 is ebook, and the special trilogy pack is only available from the Black Cockie Press website. So if you want to check that out, do. Yes, it is a very funny book. It's a very funny book. Yes. So do you think that you have understood third-person narrative? Yes, it is different to first-person narrative. It is often more versatile than first-person narrative. Yes, they are used for very, very different reasons. You will have to think about how you would like to frame your book, would you? Yes? Yes. So if you have a book that has multiple plot lines, third-person narrative is going to be the only way to go, because running 2 first-person narratives together, it can be done, but it is very, very difficult. Once you get confused about who the I is, oh, bad. Third-person narrative, if you're running multiple plots, absolutely. Yes, you can do close third person and multiple plot lines, so long as that you have so long as that there are a plot and a subplot. So you might meet the subplot characters in the main plot, but then they go on to have their own plot, and you're not jumping between perspectives in the same scene, because the last thing you want to do, although it is incredibly tempting for some people, is to head hop in third person narrative. You do not want to be jumping from head to head to head in third person narrative, because it becomes very disorientating. Yes, you can say what is in any character's head, but not in any particular scene. So you pick your scene, you pick your focus. Yes. Yes, you can give thoughts, but you don't want to be jumping from here to here to here to here to here, because it just becomes ridiculous. Yes, and very difficult to read and very confusing. So we don't want to be doing that. Close third person is very popular to write out at in the moment, and it is probably the easiest to manage if you are new to writing. But you've already written third. Omniscient third. Actually, I haven't always written omniscient third, but it is something that I moved into very quickly because it was what I wanted to tell. It was the way that I wanted to tell a story and the way I wanted to frame particular stories. Yes. Yes. No, there isn't a right or wrong. There is just what works for your story. There might be wrong for your story and you may need to rewrite it, but there is no right or wrong. There is just choices to be made. Okay, so do you feel that you understand first and third person narratives, Aloysius? Yes? Yes, you're good? Okay. Okay then. Bye-bye. Der Wolkerfinger, ich bin ja Jesus, sa. Bye-bye. If you would like to support this channel, come across to the Black Cockie Press website, www.blackcockiepress.com.au, where you will find books, writing courses, and other materials to help with your writing.